Well, we are here at Summer Game Fest Playdays at the Magic the Gathering section to talk a little bit about a new set that is coming out, the Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering set. I'm joined right now by Gavin Verhey, who is a principal game designer at Wizards of the Coast, but is the lead game designer. Is that the correct title
lead
for
game designer on Final Fantasy?
Final Fantasy.
It's been so long, Travis.
Yes,
we could
yes.
finally talk about it.
Yes.
You know, we started this collaboration like 5 years ago, and it is crazy. Like all weekend long, people keep talking to me about the set, and my instinct is, did something leak? Did something get out?
Yeah.
Oh no, we just told them all the cards. Right. It's actually okay, right? So I mean, it has been amazing, and what a weekend!
Well, and to set the stage a little bit for this interview, in case we're joking with each other a little bit, we know each other pretty well now at this point in time, especially since I got into Magic the last couple of years. So we've talked a lot over the years, and while you haven't been able to tell me anything about Final Fantasy specific to it, I have known that you've been very excited about this for a long time.
It's really satisfying to kind of like, you know, I'm not just like saying it now because it's the newest set or whatever. For years, so people are like, what are you excited about? I'm like planting my flag in the ground. Final Fantasy is going to be sick. And after telling people that for years, and it finally coming out and being all anyone wants to talk about, I'm like, I was right. It's sick, you know? So I'm so happy.
So what was the first moment where you found out you were going to be working on this? Was it a situation where you got pulled into a room and they're like, hey, we're talking right now to Square, maybe this is an opportunity, or how did that go down?
Yeah, so the way it actually worked is, so I'm the lead game designer on the set, but the lead vision designer that did like the very initial mapping out of the set was Yanni Skolnick, who is not here this weekend, but is an excellent designer. And he got the vision design of the project handed to him, and he's a big Final Fantasy fan as well, so he kind of mapped out some of the rough sketches for the mechanics, how we're going to pull cards in from the games, some of the initial talks with Square, all that kind of stuff. And then he handed it off to me from there. So by the time I had taken it over, like some of the very early work had already been figured out. Like Saga creatures had already been cracked by the time I got to the set, for example. But I remember the day I was asked, I was just called into the office and into my boss's office, and it was, you know, it's a very simple exchange. Very simple exchange. It's like, hey, you know, your last project's winding down. We need someone for this Final Fantasy thing. Do you know Final Fantasy? And I'm like, yep, I know Final Fantasy pretty well. He's like, all right. It's yours.
But you knew it was been in the works already at this point.
Yeah, I already knew it had been in the works, and I'd seen some of the early presentations and playtests. But this was, keep in mind, this was during the pandemic, right?
Okay,
so it was it was mostly all remote. There was like occasionally going into the office and you do like some playtests with like walls between you or whatever, right? But it was still really early. But I was in the office that day and talked to my boss, and he's like, yeah, I'm just gonna hand this off to you. And he said something, and I've never forgotten this. And it's so funny thing about it now. He's like, just so you know, it was like a few months in. I've been working on the set for like a few months, and I came to him and we're in our one-on-one, and I was like talking about some problem I was having, and he's like, yeah, that's fine, whatever you want to do. I just want you to know, you're gonna work on the set for a long time. Like this issue what you have right now, you're gonna fix it. I'm not worried about it. Years from now, you will still be working on this set, and when the set comes out, you will still be talking about the set. And he was so right, because here I am right now. The set is out. I've known the set for a year, but I've been working on it in various ways, you know, even ever since. So it's been a big part of my life for a long time. Yeah.
Does a set like Final Fantasy take longer to come out versus like the in-universe IP stuff that Wizards normally does?
So Universe Beyond has a way longer timeline on it because we need to work with a partner to make sure that it's true to what they want, right? So with Square Enix, we went over there like 5 total times or so to like play test with them, show them the cards, go back and forth on things. All the art, all the flavor text, all that gets reviewed by Square. They send feedback, we come back, we make revisions. So it just takes extra time because we want to do right by them, right? It's critical to us that it's a real Final Fantasy experience, and having them weigh in is critical. Yeah. When it comes to game design, we get the final say on game design. They can't tell us what to do in terms of game design, but me as a lead designer, like I'm like, no one knows Final Fantasy better than these guys, right? And so I always was like, send me your feedback. Like, and they would, you know, to their credit, they got involved. Like they would send over pages and pages and pages of card feedback, and some of it I took, and some of it I didn't, right? They're not Magic designers, but getting their feedback was amazing, and I'm so happy they were involved.
Can you remember any particular feedback that you got? Because I think it'd be really interesting to hear from folks, like, what does a person who works on a JRPG product think of in terms of like identifying like maybe a cool idea for a card or like feedback on a card that you see like in a physical card game like this?
Well, I remember, so the card that probably changed the most throughout the whole development cycle was Sephiroth. We knew we had to get Sephiroth right. Like it's Sephiroth. You know, it's like one of the biggest villains, maybe the biggest villain in gaming history. We had to get it correct. And so we went over there for a play test, and one of them opened up Sephiroth, and this is an older version, way different than what it does now. Yeah. And they were like, look, I see what you're trying to do here. It's not awesome enough. Like the front side was still like the blood artist thing where you drain them, but the back side was this totally different thing. And so we got back, and when I got home, we're like, we got to fix Sephiroth. And we came up with the emblem thing, which is like very novel, right? You don't see that on creatures very often. Another story that I love, this is a pretty good one. So we do this playtest in Japan. It's the last playtest we run there. And we play it, and they're over the moon. They love what's happening. We love what's happening. It's great. We go out to dinner, and at dinner, we're like, tell us what you think. And he's like, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. But there's one thing that's still sticking with me. Job select isn't quite right. It's not quite right yet. And at this time, it didn't confer the creature type to the creature. It just gave stats. Yeah. And so that night, we get back from dinner, and me and Dylan, who's the lead creative on the set, and Zakil, we're in this hotel called the New Otani Hotel, and it's 11 p.m., and I'm like, guys, let's crack it right now. We got to solve it right now. Yeah. And so we go to the lobby, and for the next 2.5 hours, we sit in the lobby of this hotel and just riff on how we can make job select work. And Square's feedback was basically, it doesn't feel enough different. It doesn't feel Final Fantasy enough. It's like, we've seen Living Weapon, we've seen For Mirrodin, like, what is a different take on that? And after a lot of iterating and talking, we're like, what if it just confers the creature type of the creature? It's going to add a lot of words. It doesn't really do a ton in the set, but the flavor is perfect. And we called ourselves Team Midnight New Otani, because we came with this idea at midnight. And the next morning I woke up, I sent it back to the US office, and everyone's like, that's really cool. And so I actually came back from that trip, and I went back in the set. There's a few little type nods in the set, like Minwu cares about clerics, Circle of Power gives all your wizards +1/+0, and I just put a few of those in as little touches, so sometimes the type does matter, but a lot of the time it's all flavor. But that's an example of a thing where they're like, hey, it's really close, it's not quite there, and we were able to dial it in just the last little bit we needed, right? That attention to detail.
And that's so funny to me because it feels so intuitive. Like when I read these cards or the job select cards, I'm like, oh yeah, of course that makes sense. So you're now, the hero is getting this job, and so it's interesting that some of these things that when you read the card, it feels so intuitive, but behind the scenes it's like a lot of iteration and conversation to come to that. So.
Yeah, it's sort of like, so one thing that we're really allergic to in game design, like I'm sure you've noticed, there's been a lot of words on cards in the past several years, right? I'm sure many of you have noticed this.
Yes.
We're really trying to pull back on that and take words off of cards, right? We want to leave room for flavor text, we want to leave all kinds of stuff. And so my instinct as a game designer is like, if you don't need it, chop it, right? Get it out of here. And the creature type is actually something I had an inkling of in a different version much earlier, but I was like, it's just not going to be worth like 16 words or whatever on all these cards for nothing, right? It does nothing. Why would we do this? But what I learned through the process, and a big takeaway for me is, it doesn't do nothing. It makes it feel like it's in the world, and that is worth it, right? Those 16 words, it might as well be flavor text.
Right.
But that is some good flavor text, and it really, I think, brings the whole mechanic together.
That is cool. We were talking a little bit before this, and you were saying that some of the Final Fantasy folks actually play Magic.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you can speak a little bit more to that, but that seems pretty cool that I know many of the folks on your team are big Final Fantasy fans, but it's cool to hear that so many of them also play your game as well.
Yeah, so we have a Tuesday night call every Tuesday with them, and late at night, kind of the time zones line up. And the first one I was on, they're like, I went to 4 pre-releases last weekend, and yeah, they're serious. When we would go over, we would have our meetings all day, and then after hours, time for Commander. We bring out our decks. In fact, one time, it was actually that time with the job select I mentioned you. We did the whole playtest. It was like great, and then we had to go do some other meetings, like work out some details. And they're like, yeah, can we speed these meetings up? We want to play the decks more, right? So like they're really into Magic, and really love the game. And so that passion on their side, combined with our passion of Final Fantasy on our side, was really great. And we got to teach the folks over there to play, and had some really heartfelt moments. A moment that was really meaningful to me is, so Final Fantasy IX is my favorite Final Fantasy. And I was talking with someone who was at Square, and I was like, oh, what did you work on? Like, what are some of the first things you worked on? He's like, well, actually, Final Fantasy IX is one of the first games I ever worked on, and I was a huge piece of it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it was my favorite game. And I was like, who's your favorite character? And he's like, well, my favorite character is actually Queen Braun, but like no one ever does anything with her, right? She's like this side villain, and like no one ever does anything. And I was like, hold on a second. And I like grabbed the deck I had and was like, flip. You mean this Queen Braun? And like had her art and everything. And he was overjoyed, right? Awesome. He was like, this is the character represented here, and this set lets us go a little deeper and pull some of that stuff. And it was cool that I got to make someone who made my childhood happy in return, right?
So I know that you worked a ton on the Doctor Who set, came out a couple years ago, and that had a long history of stuff to pull from different characters and stuff. Similarly here, you're working with 16 different titles that you're trying to represent. How difficult was it to make sure that you were like checking all those boxes, especially with some of the lesser known titles? Because as you said, like Sephiroth such a huge villain, always going to be in the set.
Yeah.
But then it's also like, okay, you need to figure out what to pull from for some of these older games, some of the games that are a little less known, a little less played. So how difficult was it to pull from all 16 of these?
Very. So the first thing we did, so the game knowledge we had basically, right? Like everyone on the team, between all of us, we had all the games covered. We went back and played some of them again, but to refresh in our memories, but we had all the beats covered. So the first thing we did is we took all 16 games and we wrote down all the heroes, all the villains, all the story moments, all the items, all the locations we could think of, right? Like what is the best stuff? And we kind of bucketed it into 3 tiers. Tier 1 is like, gotta have it, right? This is the hero and villain from every game, in almost every case made it in. The most iconic story moments, like those have to go in. Tier 2, as you might imagine, is like 1 ring down. It's a cool party member. Maybe it makes it, maybe it doesn't make it in, but like it's pretty well loved. It's a good chance, right? And then at Tier 3 is like, these are the deep cuts. These are like Commune with Beavers. If you played Final Fantasy 2, you know that you know what this is. If you don't, no idea, right?
Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure to put all these in the set. Right? It wasn't just we're going to take all the Tier 1 things, because to make a really like authentic feeling Final Fantasy experience, you've got to also get those deep cuts. It's really important. So we laid all those out, and then we basically used that as our structure. Now, obviously stuff shifts around over time. You're like, this character's not working, or hey, we need this, or here's the thing that happened. I said the game, we worked on the set for 5 years. Well, about 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, another game came out.
Yeah.
And so we actually had a weekend. I saved like 10 or so spots in the set for Final Fantasy 16. And we actually had a weekend where we all just played through it, right? We're like, all right, it's out, let's play through it. We're like, all right, this character should be a card, and this character should be a card or whatever, and got those all into the set. So there was a lot of that kind of iteration on the fly, but also the initial structure was really strong. I'd say, 80+% of that initial structure stayed all the way through, and a couple other things I added in over time.
Another question along those lines is like, Final Fantasy has some clear cards that you're going to put into the set that mesh with a certain color. So like Ifrit, as in so many Final Fantasies, and
he's going to be red. Yeah.
But there are, Magic is so bound by the 5 colors, which I think is one of the things that makes it so iconic.
Right.
But I think it can also be difficult whenever you're trying to port a game, or 16 games in this situation, into this world that isn't really based around like 5 colors. So how much of a design challenge is that? Because, for instance, like I'm sure there are some creatures that, Chocobo you could kind of see being green, but then maybe you want to make like heroes that are green. Like, how does that all work in terms of just being a challenge from a design standpoint?
Yeah, it's really challenging for actually a similar but different reason to what you talked about. Some characters, it's like bang on, right? Like Clive, always gonna be mono red. Like he turns into Ifrit, done deal, he's red. But a well-written character, as so many characters in Final Fantasy are, have aspects of all 5 colors to them. Like if you think about yourself, you have aspects of all 5 colors to you, right? Like no one is one thing. And so some characters were obvious, but for some characters what we had to do is something I call the snapshot moment, where you look at their whole story and you're like, I'm gonna make the card about this bit right here,
right,
and that's what colors are gonna make them. So a good example is in the main set, Sephiroth is mono black, right? He's about to turn into the One-Winged Angel, he's ready to crash a meteor into the planet. He is a bad dude.
Yeah.
He is mono black. In the commander deck right here, we have red-white Sephiroth.
Yeah.
This is Sephiroth as he's learning about his past. He's angry. He's turning into a villain, but he still the soldiery nature of him, and he's turning into that villain at that moment. And so he's white-red Sephiroth. And so there's 2 very different bits of the Sephiroth story, and they're different colors as a result. So we did that a few times with characters, and it was like, what moment do we want to grab from this character in time? Yeah.
There's also, when we're talking about design, the sort of power level conversation of cards, especially because Magic has so many different formats.
Yeah.
You have to figure out how to design for these different things. When I first heard Final Fantasy was coming out this year, this was a couple of years ago, and it made sense to me. I'm like, okay, I bet you it's like a summer release because they usually release like a Modern Horizon set. Lord of the Rings came out at that time, and I somewhat expected it to be like Lord of the Rings power level, which a lot of people talked about as being like half the power level of a Modern Horizon set. It's debatable if that's how that works, but then we learned, I think it was last year at MagicCon, that all the Universes Beyond sets were going to be going into standard. So how much of a design challenge is that for you all, and how much were you involved in terms of adjusting the set over to standard playable and all that type of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so, we've evolved our Universe Beyond strategy like a lot over the past few years, right? But we knew about it being standard with plenty of time to like make the cards and play test it. So this set went through all the rigor that all of our sets do, right? The full play design team, it got the full period. to play test, iterate on cards, all that stuff. So it got the full treatment basically, right?
Yeah.
And we knew, especially as our first Universes Beyond set, legal in all formats, we wanted to give it all the time and attention it deserved. And so, yeah, it got a lot of playtesting. We did so much limited balancing, and I'm obviously the most biased person in the world, but I think the draft format is sick, and I'm excited for you to all try it out.
Yeah.
And except for you to try it out, I know you love draft. And for standard, we put a lot of time and energy in. But we did do a few different things this time around. One thing we did that I think is very interesting is we knew people coming into Magic through Final Fantasy, which is going to be a lot of, right? A lot of people are going to see Final Fantasy, never played Magic before, let's come check it out.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy a bunch of Final Fantasy cards, cool. We knew a thing that would happen was the people we want to play with a lot of Final Fantasy cards together, right? You want to have something that feels a little cohesive. And if I love Final Fantasy, I don't want to be like, well, I take 4 cards and put it in a deck of all other cards, right? That's going to happen some, but could we build standard decks that had a huge focus on the set? So we built some themes into the set with a lot of infrastructure to make them work, using a ton of cards from the set. So a good example is red-white equipment, right?
Yeah.
You've got Cloud, Therian, Buster Sword, Raban, Freya, all really strong equipment pieces you'll play 3 to 4 copies of as the backbone of your red-white equipment deck. The town strategy, we tried to see if we could get that maybe to be in at least a casual constructed shape.
Yeah.
It's like all the towns you need from this set, right? A lot of the town rewards, they're all in this set. The bird deck, I love the bird deck. Go Birds, so excited. Is like a lot of birds here and some Bloomborough birds too, but a lot of birds from this set. So we tried to build some kind of insular decks here that will still need other pieces from standard, but could be heavily Final Fantasy. So we did a few philosophical tweaks for this set, but the time and rigor we put in was absolute. And honestly, when I look at this set compared to Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Rings, I think, has a lot of power concentrated in the top end of cards, right?
Yeah.
The One Ring, Orcish Bowmasters, even stuff like Reprieve, right? Pretty strong cards. There's a handful of cards like that, but then it drops off really fast. Where I feel like probably nothing in Final Fantasy meets the One Ring. I mean, I hope not, honestly. You know, that card is pretty wild.
Yeah.
But I think the depth is way larger, and I think that the standard testing we did helped make sure there's more cheap, efficient cards, more cards that you want to play. Maybe look at in internal formats. There's maybe more commander shots for you to roll with. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, like maybe VV's totally cracked. You know, like it might happen. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty happy with how things turned out there.
And I know that you said you had a lot of time to adjust things to the set being standard, but I'm just like fascinated by how that transition might work, because it's like, does the email come in and you open up a doc and you change like 1-2 and you you take the 2 and just make it, now this is a 1-1. Like how do you manage these things? Because you also have to kind of figure out, I assume, like what is the power level of a modern card versus a standard card, and how much can we break these things into modern?
Yeah, so I mentioned there's like a lot of time to figure it out. So to kind of give you an idea of how the design process works. So vision design happens really early. That's what Yanni was leading, as I mentioned earlier. And during then, like power level is not anything you're thinking about, right? Just like you're making cards. And then once it hands off to set design, it lasts for a really long time. Like set design might last for a year plus.
Yeah.
So it's a very long scale. And the further down the pipeline you get, the closer it gets to being completed. The earlier you are, the more rough things are. And we knew with the change early enough that it was before we were getting to like any kind of standard testing. We weren't even testing standard when we decided it would be a standard legal set. That would happen much later in the process.
Yeah.
So cards were not in their final stages at all.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't like, we got to change anything around. We just, looked at the cards, we're like, these just are some cool cards, right?
Yeah.
And then when we got into the standard testing and that actually happened, that's when we iterated and tested and made tweaks, and some cards got buffed and some cards got pulled down. But it didn't really impact the set a ton from like what we were planning to do with it, right? It wasn't like, all right, we got to add a mana to all of these cards. It was nothing like that. Plus, like, the main thing that you're testing during the bulk of set design is limited, which doesn't really change at all there, right? Like the power level for limited stuff is going to stay about the same.
Yeah, that makes sense. Whenever you're looking at this set, are there cards in it that were your pet cards, or cards that you were like, I definitely want this in there, especially because I know you want to create something for everyone, and I think that you guys did a really good job. We were just talking about how all the titles are represented. But for instance, 9 is your favorite. So maybe there were characters that you really wanted to make sure were in there, something you're really excited about.
Yeah, I put my thumb on the scale for 9 a little bit. The black mages were the thing it was Yanni's idea. He had thought about it and not put it in the set. And he mentioned it to me one day, and I'm like, those black mage tokens dealing damage, that sounds awesome. Yeah. And so I made a whole draft archetype out of it, right? So, and that was, of course, 9 inspired. So, VVS Mythic Rare, maybe I did a little something there.
Yeah.
But, I wasn't so favorite. Like, I didn't put Aiko in the set. Like, I had to cut her, unfortunately. It was tough to figure out what to make it and not to make it in. But in terms of, things that I have favorites of in the set, during the Future League, our internal playtesting, there's one deck that I was like, I love this deck, and I got really excited about it. I don't know why I attached myself to this. I just like was so stoked about it, and that is the bird deck. I like really wanted the bird deck to work. I thought it was so cool that the green chocobos could play with the old Bloomborough blue-white birds, and that the blue-white bird theme in Bloomborough was affecting non-flying creatures, and the chocobos don't fly. I was like, this is just like, it's such a perfect fusion.
Yes.
I knew Bloomborough was going to be a hit even before it came out. I'm like, I'm sure that's going to be awesome. People are going to love it. So could we make a Bant bird deck? Could it actually come together? And so I just kept making bird cards I thought were sweet until it had everything I needed. Like, I remember one day, I build the whole bird deck out, and I'm playing, and someone's like, yeah, I just don't think it's going to work without a removal spell. And I'm like, okay. And I go back to my desk, and I'm like, Bart's and Boko, you're Flame Tongue Kavu now. Now let's play and see what happens.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it'll be strong enough for like the top level of standard or whatever, but I think the deck is pretty sick. Like I was playing some in the early access event, and you go like turn 1 Saw's Chocobo, turn 2 Mockingbird, your Saw's Chocobo, fetch land. It's pretty Traveling Chocobo with Bart's and Boko, you double Flame Tongue Kavu them. Standard's very fast right now. Obviously, it's compressed by like Monstrous Rage and the Omniscience decks and all this stuff. But I think even, especially at like the casual constructed level, it'll be a pretty cool deck. And who knows? Maybe it'll show up at the Pro Tour. Who knows?
Yeah, I do. I mean, with the standard stuff, I do wonder how much that stuff will be able to break through. I'm sure you have conversations internally with different people around like, hey, it seems like right now it might be kind of hard for some of these Final Fantasy cards to make it in, given the nature of standard and that kind of stuff. How much are you guys monitoring all that?
A lot. We're monitoring a lot. But I mean, we're monitoring a ton, and we've been making a lot of predictions. Literally, like last night, we're at dinner predicting what cards we're going to see play in the Pro Tour in 2 weeks. And we've been talking about this thing for weeks and weeks and weeks, and monitoring the standard format leading up to this. But ultimately, it's like we've said we're not going to ban any cards before the Pro Tour. We've said we're not going to ban any cards to the window later this year at the earliest, if we choose to ban anything. And so, what are we going to do, right? I mean, a couple of years ago when last year we were locking everything in. A year and a half ago when we were locking everything in. You couldn't predict what standard was going to look like today. We had some ideas, but we certainly couldn't predict what it was going to look like right now. So we'll see what happens. Honestly, though, with every passing day, I get a little more excited about the cards showing up because people are discovering more things. As I mentioned, there's a bunch of archetypes we built into the set that like you have to. It's not just as easy as like, oh, take these 4 cards and like put them in an existing deck.
Right.
There's a lot of things you need to play with the whole set to kind of uncover. I was watching some of Ash Lizzle's videos, and she built this awesome Reanimator deck with a Yuna, where you're like are bringing back the Overlords and Bahamut's and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, that's a deck we had. It's not immediately obvious, but like it's a pretty cool deck. And so, okay, can that get refined? And a bunch of other decks too. So I don't want to ruin all the discovery. We'll see what you all discover out there. But I'm hopeful that we'll see some stuff show up at the Pro Tour beyond like Starting Town, which is obviously an amazing land. But I really do feel good about it.
With Universes Beyond specifically, there are these moments where you all will be creating cards that will be something that you want to delight and surprise a person who's never played Magic before.
Yeah.
And that kind of introduces this level of collectability to Magic, at least in a different direction than it normally goes, because obviously Magic has been a game that collectors have had interest and engagement with for a very long time. But now you're trying to be like, hey, Doctor Who fan, like maybe it'd be cool to have the 10th Doctor. How much, as you guys are working on this project, how much of it goes into like, all right, this is a really cool card. We want this to be standard playable. We want this to be something that is fun for Commander. But then you also need to design cards that are like special and cool and collectible for Final Fantasy fans. How do you manage all these different goals?
Well, the best of all worlds is when it combines neatly, right?
Yeah.
Like if you look at Cloud, it's like Magic player. It looks like Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah.
That's a strong card. Final Fantasy fan, he gets a big sword. Done. It's like some stuff like that fuses together really beautifully.
Yeah.
Other things are a little more tricky. Like I think about like the Eos Adamantoise. So this is a card I made and put in the set. It was not in our like initial draft of what the set was going to look like. But when I thought about big moments in Final Fantasy, I was like, 15 came out. There were the rumors of this boss. It was going to take like 70 hours to defeat her or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, this has to be in the set somewhere. And so, is that card going to be the best card in Standard? I would be very surprised. But do you look at it and you're like, holy moly, 20 toughness, it like damage doesn't go away over turns, you get a huge reward when you kill it, boom, that feels like the card.
Yeah.
Like that's meant to delight a Final Fantasy fan. And it is, I'm sure it will delight Commander players too, which is great. But every card should be for somebody. And so it should either delight a competitive audience who's playing Standard or Modern or what have you. It should delight a Commander audience, or it should delight a Final Fantasy fan, right?
Yeah.
Or a drafter, of course. Got to make sure the draft environment is good.
Thank you.
Common or uncommon.
Yeah.
But like, when you look at the rares, those are kind of the three things you're trying to hit. And there are some rares that are just like, you read them and you're like, oh, this is for the Final Fantasy fans out there. But they almost always have another thing they're doing too.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it all plays out. And of course, the great thing, and also the scary thing about my job, is you can never be totally sure, right? The thing that you are like, this is for sure gonna hit, might totally miss. And the thing that you never expect to hit might be totally sick. And that's part of the fun of Magic,
So obviously we're talking about things from a little card design perspective in terms of the gameplay elements, which I know is where you really specialize in. But then there are these other things that you all have done with this set, like the Amano arts and the chocobos that are collectible and all that stuff. So how do you arrive at that kind of decision on these are the things that we'd like to put into the set because we think they will be aspirational for the Final Fantasy collector, for instance?
Well, I want to give a big shout out to Zakil, because
and we should say Zakil
Gordon is the architect of the set. So basically he's like the product manager, I guess. He makes like the final calls, and like he's the person that every water flows through, right? So like I work on design, Zakil touches everything involved in the set, right? And amazing guy to work with. And partially so, because my history at Wizards, I've been there for 14 years.
Yeah.
This is the only set where I asked for something, I got it.
Okay.
And basically it was the rule of cool. Like I would go to Zakil and I was like, can we get this? And I would always be like, he's going to say yes.
Yeah.
And he would say yes. I remember the Sid thing. There are 15 different Sids in the set. I went to Zakil one day and I was like, look, I know we probably can't do this because getting 14 additional arts for an uncommon is absurd. But can we do this? And he was like, put it in the set. We'll get the art for it, no problem. And then as a result, people love that, right? They thought that was so cool. And so one day, Zakil calls a meeting, and the meeting does not have a title. So I'm like, uh-oh, what's going to happen? It's me and Zakil and Dylan, who's the creative lead on the set, and Daniel. And we get in the room, and Zakil's like, all right, here's the deal, guys. We've talked with Square, and we're going to be able to use the concept art. And we're like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because that's iconic, right? You think about Final Fantasy, that concept art is incredible. Like Amano stuff and Amura stuff and like all these classics are a huge piece of what makes Final Fantasy Final Fantasy. And so we're like, okay, great. What do we do with it, right? And we talked about a lot of these. We talked about, should it be, it sounds so silly to say out loud, but should it be just on art cards that show up in the packs? Could it be on packaging somewhere? Like, where should we put this? And then I was the guy that was like, let's do a bonus sheet of concept art. And it evolved a little bit, right? It ended up with some screenshots and some other stuff. And it evolved a bit from there. But man, are they awesome, right? Like, it's so cool to get some of these iconic images in your booster pack. And then for me, as a drafter, like I love bonus sheets because it makes every draft a little bit different. And it's like, oh, what's happening this time? Well, Yawgmoth is here, and he's going to destroy you, And it really makes that 12th draft more interesting. There's some pretty weird cards you can draft around too. So I've lost to my favorite card on the bonus sheet is Laboratory Maniac.
Yeah.
And it was the one that I fought to stay, even though it didn't have like a perfect creative fit. Because I'm like, guys, Laboratory Maniac is so fun.
Yeah.
You draft it first, and there's like all this self-mill. The black-green deck is self-milling, the town deck is going long. You can win with it, and it is awesome. So I encourage you, if you see an Early Lab Maniac, slam that thing, going on like black, green, blue, town mill, you will have a blast.
Yeah. Now I know we're running out of time here, but I did want to say I'm hosting with FlyQuest a 2HG tournament with a bunch of Magic creators and gaming creators next week. And this will probably be airing during part of that. So I wanted to know if you, as the person who helped design this set, had any advice on some really cool picks or things to look out for in the 2HG format.
Well, of course, I'm a big 2HG fan, right? Given I worked on Battle Bond, that's totally up my alley. So I'll give a couple things. You always look for each opponent. That's the magic word, right? Each opponent is great. So those Black Mage tokens I mentioned earlier, ding each opponent, which is nice. But my secret thing you really want to look for, and you're not going to get it. It's very often. Only some of you will get it. Is on the bonus sheets, there's Finn the Fangbearer, who gives poison counters out.
Yes.
And you can build, I've actually done it one time, as Arya, shout out to Arya on our development team. She's drafted at one time the poison deck with Finn the Fangbearer and Death Touch creatures.
Okay.
Poison very strong into a giant. You can like totally cheese your opponent out that way. So if you get Finn the Fangbearer and you look at your card pool, you have enough Death Touch, try and build this one player like deals with all the creatures or gives it flying or something and you bash through. Easy dubs, easy dubs.
Awesome. Okay. We'll see. This will be airing after people have built their decks, so maybe people will go back and do some sideboarding after they see this interview.
Yeah, I literally had a friend text me yesterday from the pre-release. It's like, hey, did you guys ever try Finn in 2HG? And I'm like, oh, this sounds sick. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the interview. Is there anything you want to say to any of the fans out there who are excited for the set or playing it, going through it?
Yeah, I'll just say, like, it's been a long road to get here. It has been so much work. It's such a huge part of my life and so much fun. Like, imagine what you were doing 5 years ago. Just think about what your life was in 5 years ago. So much has happened in that time since then. And so this has been like a huge part of my life for so many years, like my highs, my lows, my ups, my downs. Every card I can connect to a moment in my life. And the whole team feels that way. And the team at Square Enix also feels that way, of pouring our passion and our care into this. So I hope you feel that as you play. And I hope it takes you back to a time and a place where you were a kid and you had a controller in your hand and you were just in awe of the games in front of you. Because it does that for me, from the basic lands to the mythic rares. So enjoy.
Thanks so much for the interview. For everyone else, you can check out the rest of my coverage of all things Magic right here on my channel.